Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to another recent reads on Sundays. I haven't done one of those in a while because last time was the tops, and before that, I think I fell off the wagon or something. But it's been at least 2 weeks, and I've read quite a couple of books. The first thing I want to say is I'm not going to talk about the BookTube prize books. I finished 3 for the quarterfinals. I'm judging translated fiction for the quarterfinals, and as you know, it's always 6 in a group, so I have 3 more to go, and I will read those beginning of May. I think for April, I'm going to leave the BookTube prize for what it is. Half done is good. And I've also almost finished all the 16 books longlisted for the Women's Prize. But as you know, if you follow my channel, I make separate review videos for those books. So if you think, well, in 2 weeks she didn't really read a lot, that's because I'm not talking about all the books that I finished. No, I know you would never think that. But let's talk about the books that I can talk about and that I finished. And the first one was a buddy read with Adam from Memento Mori. As always, I will leave his Instagram account down below, and he makes the most beautiful artsy book pictures. I feel I'm really jealous of his creativity. So yeah, go check out his Instagram account if you haven't yet. And we read, as you probably remember, that we are making our way through Ursula Le Guin's work. And we read the Hainish cycle, and now we are into the Malafrena, the Orsina. And we read the novel Malafrena, beginning of the year, I think, or maybe even in December last year, and now we have read the complete stories and songs. If you remember that I was not I didn't feel Malafrena was that good of a book. Orsina is a fictitious country in Eastern Europe, situated somewhere in the neighborhood of Austria. But the context, the historical context that Le Guin uses is real. So it's the Malafrena is situated in the 19th century after 1815, and the other countries and how they are ruled and what happens, that's real. Just the country itself, Orsina, is just fictitious. And in the stories, she also situates the people in this country, Orsina, again, fictitious. And what I really liked about the stories is that they go through time. So at the end of each story, you find a tiny number, like 1960. And at first I thought, oh, that's the number she wrote it. But the next story was 1140. And then I thought, can't be. So it's the year that the story is set in. And so it ranges from 1140 to 1960, and you get a whole idea of the history of this country. So I really, really enjoyed those stories, some more than others. That's always the case, I think, with the short story collection. But some of them were fantastic, others were good, and 1 or 2 that I thought, yeah, but definitely appealed more to me and also to Adam, by the way, than the novel. But I'm still happy that we finished this chunk of stories and novels and what have you set in this country. So, and they were first published in 1977, I think. So that was the first one. The next one was also a buddy read, but non-fiction, buddy read with Kathleen from Kathleen Ann, and we finished Lola Olufemi, Feminism Interrupted, published in 2020. This is an independent publisher, and yeah, I think the cover is horrendously ugly, but that might just be me. Lola Olufemi, I showed you the picture, I think, when I hauled the book, is a young black feminist and writer and organizer in London. And this book focuses on, it's not, it's just under 200 pages, and it's sort of an essay collection. And she tackles feminism. She approaches her idea of feminism through various topics. So, for instance, feminism and trans rights, or feminism and reproductive rights, or feminism and poverty, especially with regards to food supply. So it's an overview, if you will. And Kathleen Ann and I mean, I shouldn't speak for Kathleen Ann, but we liked it. I think it is a good introduction, in a way, to the status quo of feminism from the point of view of a young black woman in the UK. But if you have read a lot of feminist literature or books, thoughts, also contemporary, before, it might not give you that many new ideas, but it still was really valid and interesting. So if you are more looking for something short to give you an introduction into current contemporary feminist thought from this Black UK perspective, then I can certainly recommend this one. And another buddy read, this time with Courtney from Courtney Ferreter. Was our first buddy read, and we read this modern classic, Willa Carter, O Pioneers, first published in 1913, and it's the first in her Great Plains trilogy. And we follow, it's set in the 19th century, and we follow this young girl in the beginning, Alexandra. She is 18, 20 in the beginning of the book, and we follow her until she's in her mid-40s. She inherits the farm from her father, even though she has brothers, but her father rightfully thinks she's the most capable. And so we follow her attempt to make the farm successful. And there is hardship, and there is melodrama. I really appreciated the atmosphere. I'm, first of all, from a city. I have never lived or worked or been on a farm, but I'm also from, obviously, Europe, born in Germany, have been living in Holland. So I am not familiar with a country where you had these vast spaces, and you would go west and there would be nothing. So it's for me a very interesting, also because it's unfamiliar setting and atmosphere. And I really, really appreciated and enjoyed how Carter handled the atmosphere. And I loved the main character, Alexandra, especially because I think in the 19th century, but certainly also still when the novel was published in 1913, it was quite unusual that you would have the perspective of this very strong and strong-willed woman who would do things, become a successful farmer, that is normally done by the husband. So I appreciated that, but the plot, the pure plot, the story was a bit meh, especially towards the end, the second half, when you have, as Courtney rightfully put it, too much melodrama. But I'm really happy that I read it. It's also on my 1001 books you have to read before you die list, so I can cross this one off. So those are the books that I can talk about that I read, and on to the books that I'm still working on. And I think the first one I wrote down, let me see that I sort of have the same. Yeah, it's also nonfiction, A Ghost in the Throat by Ghríofa, an Irish writer that is, look at this. In the middle of this beautiful cover, like they are trying to make sense and have this in the middle of the, Anyway, I'm sorry about that. I talked about it a little bit already. It's a combination of a memoir. Doireann Ghríofa is a poet, but the first part, I'm only maybe a third, not even a third in, focuses on her having 4 children, I think, under the age of 6. So she, has quite a bit of pregnancy in a short period and giving birth to children also in a short period. But the other part is her attempt to get to know an Irish poet from 100 or 200 years ago. And I always love the combination. We'll come back to this topic in a little bit for the last book, but I love the combination of a personal memoir connected with either a historical figure or with, nature writing. The combination, I always love that. But I have to admit, I didn't make, as you can see, much headway. So I will hopefully be able to pick up this book this weekend and finish it for next time. The next book is the last book I have to read for the Women's Prize long list, and that is Lulu Ellison, Salt Lick. I'm reading this as a buddy read with Heidi from my reading life, and we have a check-in later today, and I think we are now halfway, so we will probably also finish until my next check-in. Lulu Ellison is a more performance artist, but I think this is not a debut though. But what makes it special, at least for me, is that the book was crowdfunded. It's a dystopian fiction set in the UK, in London and in the rural countryside of England, with 2 main characters, Jess, who lives in the country, and Isolde, who lives in the city. And the premise of the book is that due to all kinds of, pandemics, but also environmental catastrophes, people don't live in the country anymore. Everybody moved to the city. I think that is an interesting premise because a lot of dystopian fiction takes the other way around. So if you have a dystopian fiction where nothing works anymore, no internet, people go back to the country in order to be self-sufficient, grow food, and live there. And the premise of this book is exactly the other way around. So I thought that was interesting. So Jess still lives with his family in the country, but more and more people move, and it's getting more and more difficult. There is no, the usual services that you would have, like if you fall, you would call an ambulance. But if you live in one of those rural areas, it might take a day until the ambulance arrives. So I felt that this premise was really new. There's also a chorus in the book, and that is not something that works for me so far, but maybe it will come all together at the end. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's well written, and I like the idea, the premise, but also the 2 characters, especially Jesse, because we learn more about him than so far we learn about Isolde. But it's really good. And then the last one is also an ebook, and also a buddy read. I'm reading this together with Sonya from Enthusiastic Reader, and you can already see the title, Only Happiness Here by Gabrielle Carey. This is a book about Elizabeth von Arnim, which that's the reason we picked it. Sonya and I read Vera by Elizabeth von Arnim a couple of months ago, and I read 1 or 2 other books by Elizabeth von Arnim, and I found her fascinating. So she was an Australian-born British writer with a very German name because she married a German count, von Arnim, and then she married a second time, and she wrote books. Anyway, and she was born, I mean, I think the first book she published was the beginning of the 20th century. So she was end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th century writer. And because April used to be Aussie April, trying to read Australian fiction, so Elizabeth von Arnhem, born in Australia, but the author of Only Happiness here, Gabrielle Carey, is an Australian author. It was a bit difficult to get the book. I'm reading it on script because I couldn't get a print version or an ebook I couldn't get the ebook at all, and a print version I couldn't get for a reasonable price. So I'm reading it on script, and if I really, really love it, then I will buy the print version for the unreasonable price. But anyway, what Gabrielle Carey, I didn't know her, by the way, as a writer. She is a writer, born in 1960-ish, or 1959 or 1961, but 1960-ish. And she discovered Elizabeth von Arnhem, and especially Elizabeth von Arnhem's approach to happiness. And that triggered this book. So the book is Only Happiness here, trying to look at Elizabeth von Arnhem's work and her life. And Gabrielle Carey is trying to learn something about how von Arnhem approached happiness. We have only tackled the first third or something of the book, and I definitely really, really enjoyed the parts about von Arnhem, about her life. And again, it's one of those books where it is a combination of a memoir with something else. And in this particular case, the something else is Elizabeth von Arnhem's biography, more or less, focusing with a vantage point of a certain topic. So I really like the parts about Elizabeth von Arnhem so far. The memoir parts haven't convinced me yet. I don't really see so far. It's more very general remarks about happiness, and I don't feel that I've gotten to know the author at all, but maybe this will change, so we'll see. So those are all the books that I finished and I'm still working on. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Happy Easter if you're celebrating, and happy Easter holiday if you have tomorrow off like I do. I have a long weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and tomorrow off, which is fantastic. And the weather is glorious, even though we need the rain. I'm enjoying the sun. So I'm going to stop filming here and I'm going to sit outside on my balcony. Have a good weekend, and I look forward to your comments, of course, as always, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.